afternoon. Welcome to College Unmazed, College Connections. Today we are going to be talking about data, the unsexy but necessary part of college choice. I think, Tim, that was actually your title suggestion. But we thought, kind of coming in today, and we've talked a lot about the 6 keys of college fit. We've talked about how students need to make an informed decision. So we really wanted to bring in some of the other aspects that we know is important in college admissions, especially data, but wanted to, how do we use it more specifically with our students? So welcome again. We are recording this. I live in Florida, and if anybody's been watching the news, Hurricane Ian is coming probably tomorrow. So we thought, let's record this, and we will post this obviously on Facebook, but as a recording. So if you have any questions, feel free to write any comments down below. And if there's nothing that we didn't answer, I will definitely email you or respond to your comment and get that answered for you. So with me today, as always, is Dr. Poynton. And we have Rich. Dr. LePan is out on vacation this week, so he will be joining us next week. But always excited to see you, as always. So, Tim, you are sort of the IPEDS guru here. Can you sort of explain what IPEDS is and how we get some of this institutional information from the schools?
Yep. So IPEDS is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, and it's something that sponsored by your tax dollars, and it's something that the federal government keeps track of and asks all colleges that receive federal funding are required to respond and submit data for the IPEDS database as it is. And then the government at the National Center for Education Statistics in particular is the area that's responsible for this. They take that information and then they try to turn it around and make it useful for people. So one of the ways that they make it useful is through one of my favorite websites is the College Navigator. And that's a fantastic place to go to get information on colleges in all of these areas, the characteristics of the institution, what are the prices, what's the net price, what's the cost of attendance, what are the admission statistics in terms of percent of students admitted, and the middle 50%, if you will, things we'll talk about a little bit later, but the middle 50% of students' SAT and ACT scores, for example. So all that stuff is presented in the College Navigator. If you use the College Board, or if you use CapEx, or if you use Peterson's, or Naviance, or a lot of these other tools pull their data from IPEDS, so it's the same information that you're getting, regardless of which tool you're using to access the information. I don't want to make it sound like Naviance doesn't have more specific information, because they do, but when you're talking about things like the SAT, ACT scores and the percent of students admitted and that kind of stuff, chances are really good they're pulling that from the IPEDS data. So all of these places that are up on the slide are great resources to use as well, and most of them are going to pull from the IPEDS data. Did I miss anything, Amanda?
No, I think that's true. So like you said, this information is pretty readily available. We use within our book College Navigator just because it's part of the Department of Education. It comes from that national database, and the other ones do the same, but they sort of, I don't want to say manipulate it, but they change it so it's maybe prettier and maybe just focuses on one or two aspects, where the Navigator has a lot of the information. But what do you think the downfall of using one of these websites are? Why might it not provide the information that students actually need to make a more informed college decision?
Yeah, I think one of the issues I think with it is if you go into College Navigator, for example, and you start expanding the arrows and looking at it, there's in some ways an overwhelming amount of information. If you look at that for just one college, and then now try to imagine you're building a list of colleges and you're actually starting off with 15 or so colleges. You're going to try to whittle that down. How do you manage all that information and compare it side by side? And that's where some of the tools do provide for side-by-side comparisons, but that's something that we developed as we were working on the book, recognized the need to be able to organize this information in a way that that made it more manageable for students to make sense of it. Because what I think happens now, unfortunately, to at least some students and families, is that they look at the amount of information available and go, oh my God, that's way too much. And then they don't look at any of it, or they'll only look at little tiny bits that are perhaps presented when they go on a college tour, for example. So that's what we've done. We'll talk about it here in just a little bit, but we developed what we call the College Data Organizer as a way to make the information a bit easier to digest.
And I also believe that when, and I've worked with students using College Board and, College Greenlight and Princeton and some of these KPECs and so forth. And I think it's very surface level, right? It's this idea of how big, how many students do they have? What's their sort of admission rate? It's at a very high level. And so you get some information, but like you said, you really, one, they don't go deeper into it. And two, they don't really understand the information that they're looking at because you're not really comparing all of their college against each other, maybe just one or two or just individually. Unless you see it sort of holistically, it doesn't all bring it together. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah, it's making it accessible and personal, like personalizing the information a little bit. So there's lots of really good colleges out there, and being able to compare the ones that you're looking at to each other, I think is really useful. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like the personal, and that kind of really leads to, our discussions of the last few weeks is a lot on the 6 keys of college fit, why we need to sort of move past reach, match, and safety, which was our topic last week. So can you kind of talk about on the CDO, the College Data Organizer, and this IPEDS information, how we sort of merge in the 6 keys of college fit with the IPEDS information?
Yeah, so what we do actually is, so we've got the 6 keys of college fit that is employed through the LEAD strategy that we have, which is the college decision making strategy. So LEADs, just if you're not familiar with our prior work on this, the LEAD strategy is just list, explore, apply, decide, and then succeed. It's the stages of the college going process for high school students. And so that structures, that's the strategy that structures kind of what you do when. So everybody, of course, first develops a list, then they explore that list a little bit more deeply to narrow down their list to the number of colleges they're going to apply to, and then of those colleges where they were accepted, they need to decide to go to one of those, right? That's the strategy. That's the overarching strategy. And what we've done is the 6 keys fit into that LEAD strategy by not focusing on every key all the time, but by focusing on certain keys at certain points. So for example, we focus on 3 of the 6 keys in the list phase. And then all of the keys are going to be revisited again in the explore phase. But then in the apply phase, you're still looking at the 6 keys, but it's different pieces of the keys, as you'll see once we dig into it here in a minute. There's lots of indicators, if you will, for characteristics related to each key, data points essentially. So instead of trying to look at all the data points at once, what we do through the LEAD strategy and the 6 keys is have you access the information that you need when you need it to make a good, informed decision.
Absolutely. And not everything, comes, with the 6 keys can be used through IPEDS, some of the information, because there's statistics, right? It's sort of percentages and numbers. And when you talk about, student support, do they have a good adaptive services? You're not going to be able to find that on any survey or report. That's something that in the explore phase, and that's what Rich or Tim was saying, is it's important to look at things at different parts of the process. So like student support, you need to use the websites, or you need to use other resources, or when you do a college visit, which we'll talk about college visits actually next week and bring in some of that stuff. So most of it, but on the CDO, for example, some of that information we can automatically bring in through IPEDS, and other times students have to sort of make an informed decision and informed rating system on how strong that college is in that key. So we'll kind of show you that in a little bit, but just wanted to mention that. So these are kind of on the screen. We talk about academic match and some of the things IPEDS will provide us. Student outcomes like retention rate, graduation rates, cohort loan default rates, salaries, and then financial match like tuition fees, average aid, and that type of thing. Did you want to add anything before we go on?
No, yeah, just to reiterate your point is that, so the 6 keys of college fit, we provide a place, the CDO, the college data organizer, is a place to organize all the information, but it doesn't give you every single bit of information just because some of it's not available for download, so to speak. So,
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about the CDO, the College Data Organizer. And like you kind of mentioned, when we started this process, we were hoping the students could just go find the information. We knew this information was important. And when we wrote the first few chapters, I remember like, oh, go find it and go do this. And then Tim, you and your magical Excel skills were able to say, I think I could make this. I could make this really great chart and we could create something that it does it for them. So do you want to explain sort of how the CDO works?
sure, it might be easiest if maybe I just share my
You want to share
screen
your screen? All right.
um, and demonstrate it. So, there we are. So there is the College Data Organizer. You can download this at collegeandmaze.com/downloads. It's free, so anybody can go there and download it. I think the only thing we ask is that you provide your email address. Um, so if you can provide your email address, you'll have access to the College Data Organizer as an Excel download or as a Google Sheets. The Google Sheets version looks a little bit different. But if you're in a school that uses Google, the Google Sheets version might be the way to go. So as you can see here, this is the College Data Organizer. It just starts off with the home screen is what you'll see when you first open it. Gives you a quick overview of the steps to use it. And then this is the meat and potatoes, so to speak, of this in terms of how you access the information. I've pulled up 5 colleges here, but you can do this for up to 12 to find a college. All of the college data is pre-populated. So this is for 3,700 some odd colleges or so. 2- and 4-year colleges are included. It's not technically every single college in the United States, but it's all the ones that have data that we're providing here. If they don't have any of this data, if they don't offer a 2-year or a 4-year degree, for example, if they only offer certificates, for example, that college will not be included in the College Data Organizer. And in that case, you could then go find information about it at the College Navigator. But in the College Data Organizer, you first identify colleges by going through the list and finding the name of the college here. So here, when you click on it, it automatically kind of populates the information that's available from IPEDS. So you'll see here under Stonehill and Syracuse University, there's no test scores, right, under the academic match key. That's because they didn't submit that data to IPEDS. Ostensibly, they were either test blind or test optional and chose not to submit the scores. So this has been increasingly common, as you know, with COVID. More and more colleges are doing that. I'm actually demonstrating here a version of the College Data Organizer that we're going to be providing in November once the latest data from IPEDS comes out. But I've added some things here that weren't in the previous version, such as the percent of students who submit SAT scores and ACT scores is new. It wasn't in the first version of the College Data Organizer. And that's just important context to know how common is it for students to be submitting SAT scores versus ACT scores. So at SUNY Albany, for example, 14% of students submit ACT scores, but 87% submit SAT scores. So as you might imagine, here in the northeast of the United States, we tend to be SAT heavy. Other parts of the country, as you know, are less so. So again, that's just a quick overview. You'll see what we have here and how we've organized the information is we've got it broken down by the 6 keys of College Fit, and we pre-populate the data that's available from IPEDS. So in the academic match key, that's going to be things like the student to faculty ratio, the academic environment, the selectivity or the percent of students who are admitted, and then the selectivity by students of the college, as I like to think of it, the yield, using admissions terminology, is the percent of students who are admitted who actually enroll. So that's provided here. In the student outcomes key, the next key, we've got the retention rate, which is the number of freshmen who come back as sophomores. And then we've got some graduation rate information, the 4- and 6-year graduation rates and the cohort default rate. I like to think of the cohort default rate as a measure or an indicator of the financial health of graduates. So colleges that have lower loan default rates, I would guess, again, this is not research based, but it seems to me to make sense that students who graduate from college able to pay off their loans probably have lower amounts of debt and better career-related outcomes from their college experience than those who are less likely to pay off their loans, right? So that's what the cohort default rate is. That's provided here. We also added, again, this is new. I don't know if Amanda's seen this before actually, but we added the 150% time to degree completion. That's a common metric that's used in higher education. So for a 4-year degree, that's a 6-year graduation rate. So you find those two items to be similar here. Where this 150% time to degree completion comes into play is in 2-year colleges, who obviously don't have a 4-year graduation rate. So we've just added that line here to make it so that there's some data to put there for the 2-year colleges. So that's student outcomes. That information is provided here. Then we've got a lot of information on financial match. We've got the sticker price, as we call it, which is the tuition and fees, broken down by in-state and out-of-state, if you've got public schools on your list. We've got the estimated cost of living expenses, whether you're living on campus or off campus. That's all of these living arrangement items right here. And then we've got, perhaps most importantly, one of my favorite pieces of this is the average overall net price, and then the average net price by income. So this is where I really like the average net price by income, because it really highlights what you're likely to pay given your family's income level. And as you can see, there's some places like here at Stonehill College, the average net price is about $35,000, but the actual net price ranges from about $25,000 to $38,000. At Syracuse University, they tend to, it seems like, give more of their merit money, or sorry, more of their financial aid scholarship money in a need-based manner. So they are providing the lowest income students are paying about $17,250, which I put SUNY Albany here on purpose because that's the average net price that you pay if you go to a state school. So low-income students who attend a private university can pay just as much as they would pay if they went to a public university. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's an important thing to know. And it's one of the things that always makes me cringe a little bit is when I hear people say, "Oh, I'm only applying to public colleges because they're cheaper." And while that's often true, it's not always true. So,
well, look at Tufts there. Tufts average net price for under 30,000, 8,000. You know, so you can see like which colleges, like you said, really where they provide the aid at, right? And they really try to reduce that cost. And then the percent of students receiving aid, that one's one that we talk about quite a bit as well. Like at Stonehill.
Yeah, so the percent of students receiving aid, again, so this is looking at the difference. It's another way to get some quick insight into the difference between the net price and the sticker price. So here at Stonehill College, which is a good college here in Massachusetts, I know several students who went there who were good students, but every single student who attended Stonehill, at least as a freshman, so this is full-time, first-time freshman, they got on average a $25,000 tuition discount, which is more than half of their listed tuition and fees of $47,000. So, wow. So nobody pays the sticker price, in other words, right? So then why do they list it? I don't have the answer to that question. Why a college like Stonehill doesn't just cut their tuition in half for everybody. I think part of it has to do with the fact that people like to feel like they're being given money. But I would say in this case, Stonehill isn't giving you money. They're just not taking it. It's like the difference between when you go use a coupon at the store, you don't say, "Oh, the store gave me money," right? No, you said that they gave you a discount, and that's what the colleges are essentially doing here. It's a discount rate. So thank you. I know I've been talking a lot, Amanda. Anything else you wanted to highlight on this part of the CDO before we switch tabs here?
No, I think one of the things that you didn't mention that I think is one of the coolest things and functions of the CDO is the color coding. You know, so the color coding you see on Tim's chart there, you have green, you have white, and you have yellow. So when we were talking about some of these statistics and how to sort of highlight them, we wanted to highlight whatever benefited the student, right? So whether that's a lower tuition price, whether that's maybe lower admission scores to get in, whatever sort of benefited the student in terms of good things that maybe you should check out as a positive. So that's what green is. White was sort of in the middle, like between all of your colleges, and then yellow was sort of cautionary, something to pay attention to. And so it's really important, like, for example, Brown University has probably what is going to be one of the harder ones to get in. But if you look down at maybe their outcomes, it might turn to more green because the students that are able to get in are going to have greater maybe outcomes because of the selectivity of the college and so forth. And you can toggle that on and off. And it's comparison based on your chart. So if you have really selective schools, you're going to see some schools kind of change because it's, again, based on what schools you're putting in the chart, not necessarily just because of that school. So if you have higher admission champ schools, you're going to see the scores again change a little bit. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, no, just I think you did, you nailed it. But just, yeah, the color coding has to do with it's relative to the other schools that are on this list. So the green ones are the ones that are in the student's favor. That's the top third. The yellow ones are the bottom third. And the white, no color, is the middle third. So we didn't want to use red because we would never say, it's bad or it's negative or something like that, but it is something to pay attention to. So in this case, unsurprisingly, Brown University is the most challenging school to gain acceptance to here with the 8% admission rate, which is the lowest of all of the admission rates on this list. So therefore, it is colored yellow. The ones
Ahead,
where
sorry.
the highest percent of students are admitted are the green ones at 69. So sorry, go ahead.
Nope. I was going to say, so, as a, school counselor or practitioner, program director, I would probably have this maybe done as an example. So if there are some traditional schools that your students go off to, here I'm in Southwest Florida, so Florida Gulf Coast University, USF, UF are pretty normal. I would go ahead and make this up and have this as an example, but students then can, download it themselves, or you can share it with them. And they can then type in their own schools, especially if they're thinking of out-of-state schools. But I do think that this information is one, as a practitioner, you need to understand why it's green, white, yellow, and how to sort of then explain it to students. And I think when we explain it towards the 6 keys, it gives it a greater context, right? And if you, again, what Tim was saying earlier, you don't have to do it all at once. Altogether, this is a really big document. So that's why we would really implore you to look at, let's talk about academic match and that section. Then let's talk about financial match and personal match, and sort of go down, because again, as a whole, if they don't understand what the color coding and the numbers mean, it's not going to have as much context. But I think once you dive into it, let's do one down in, I think, like Tim was saying, the cohort loan default rate is one that I think is really interesting. Institutional aid, like there's some that just sort of make you pause of concern, like if your 6-year graduation rates are really not great, or even your 4-year graduation, or like, so let's look here at student outcomes for Alfred. Only 67% of students stay at the campus, so over 1/3 leave after their freshman to sophomore year. And then you look at sort of their graduation rate for 4 years, it's only 46%. So the students that start, and only 46% are actually graduating on time. I don't know about you, as a parent, I'm not planning on a 6-year college going process. So I would say, if I was looking at that school, and I know nothing about Alfred University at all, I would ask, what are some of the support services, if that's where you want to go? What are some support services at the college, like tutoring and advising and academic supports and things like that, if you're going to go there, to help you navigate that system, so you're not part of that 64%, that's not right, 54% of students that don't end up graduating within 4 years? I would ask a little bit more questions. So that's how I think I would sort of structure that
Yeah. And
conversation.
I think that's the key. Is the idea here is to raise questions for you that you should get the answers to. Like, why is it that 1/3 of the students at this university don't come back as freshmen, or
Mm-hmm.
that less than half of them graduate in 4 years, right? And the fact is, particularly with the 4-year graduation rates, that's based on students who attended the school 5 or 6 years ago. So the
Yeah.
college may very well be doing something different that they weren't doing before to improve that 4-year graduation rate. So it's a question worth asking if you go on a campus tour or ask an admissions counselor to see. I noticed the statistic reported in the College Navigator, for example, saying that your 4-year graduation rate is 46%. Have you done anything to change that in the past few years? I'd be surprised if they said no, that they haven't been doing anything, because it's something that colleges pay attention to. So thank you, Amanda, for raising that, because that is one of the key things here. Is we're not going to use the data to make decisions. We're going to use the data to help us ask questions that can then help us make better decisions a little bit later. But at this point, we're not just going to make completely data-based decisions in a vacuum, so to speak.
And that's where I think we do a really good job in the explore section. Like we said, we try to break down some of this information so it's digestible as you go, and you're sort of building on that skill set. And then we say, okay, well, this is a question to ask when you go do a college visit, which again, we'll talk about next week. This is maybe what you need to ask, right? Because a lot of times we get kind of generic questions that don't really mean anything. And so we're trying to say, if you could do this before you go, you're going to have a much deeper and richer conversation. And the college is going to know that you're serious about the college because you're doing your research, that you understand. And it helps answer some of those questions that I think are really pivotal. So I think this on the forefront is amazing. I love this. And again, thank you, Tim, for putting this all together. And I don't know, I think you said, was it 20,000 lines of data that is on the back end of this chart. So you do really amazing work, but it doesn't end there. So I know we're already over time, but I definitely want just to show there's other things that the CDO, this college data organizer, allows students to do to compare. And so this is under the charts function. So it's the last tab at the bottom. And you have different information that sort of now narrows it down so they can see some key things that we think are really important for students to pay attention to. Percent admitted, that retention rate, the 4-year graduation rate, and then the overall net price. And so it's just a nice little comparison just on that one statistic. And then when they do get the net price calculator or your awards letter, it will also help you compare as well. And then lastly, one of my favorite charts, which we actually have in the book under Emily as our case study, but you can enter in based on their sort of median scores, like Tim was talking about, the ACT and the SAT, you can type in a student score and that line moves, and you can see a little more clearly what might be a lower chance of admissions or a higher chance. So for example, Tim, if he's adding in it, what did you put for your your SAT is 1,000. So if you look at SUNY and Albany and the Alfred, you are exceeding their admission criteria just on that one piece, right? It's only one data piece. But you are pretty far away from Tufts and Brown. And so that would definitely be a low chance of admissions. So you can kind of move that if you're kind of guessing what your scores are and where your scores lie in their admission criteria. You want to add anything to that? So it's one of my favorites. I love that chart.
Yeah, no, it's just a way to visualize, like
Yeah.
all of the charts here are just ways to visualize the same information. And here with the movable line, it just helps you visualize where do you fit in the middle 50%. One of the things, sometimes if you get an average SAT score, which admissions offices sometimes report when you do a tour, they'll say, oh, the average score is a 1,200. Well, the average means that half of the people actually have below a 1,200 and half had above that. So this just helps you visualize the middle 50%. These blue bars here represent the middle 50%. So that still means that, let me move this a little bit here to 1,000. So this is in the bottom. Let me make it a little lower. So this is now below the 25th percentile. That means that there's still people with a 950 SAT that were admitted to Alfred University, but they're in the minority. Now it's less than 25% of them. So it just helps you visualize that for all the colleges on your list. Yeah, that was all I had. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Sorry, we've gone over time. Sorry.
That's okay. I do want to say before we go, and we've talked about these already, and again, if you can follow us on social media, we're going to be posting some of these graphs and charts. throughout the week, so you can kind of see how you can use that with your students. We will at a later date, we're going to dive more into something called the common data set. Not today because we ran out of time. We knew we would, but there's another kind of cool data piece that you can bring into the conversation as well. That's part of the CDO, but it's a little bit more work. But we are going to be talking next Tuesday about being an informed consumer on college visits. So again, looking at that list and explore phase, looking at this information like from IPEDS and so forth, and now really asking better questions and how to sort of navigate some of that information and make your college visits really worthwhile. So thank you everybody for coming today and watching this recording. We appreciate it. Continue to follow us at collegeunmazed.com, or just at collegeunmazed, I guess, is our social media. And we will see you all next week. And if you're from Florida, stay safe, be careful, and hopefully we all hope for the best this week. So take
Yes,
care. Thank you, Tim.
indeed. Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. Bye.
Take care.